diesel to gasoline is like comparing apples to oranges, right? They're different, but also kind of similar, right? You get better gas mileage in a diesel, you get more efficiency, you do pay more for that gas, so it ends up working out to be about kind of almost the same. Yeah, so when we compare like a, 2010, great year, one of the better years for the Jetta, we have a four-door manual TDI and a four-door manual base model, right? We can see that the, diesel is definitely more expensive. Remember, these are pretty much equal. And then we can see, of course, we get to the gas mileage section, 3041 for the diesel and 2230 is, a big difference. You do get less horsepower, for the diesel, but I would say it's worth it. And, Diesel had really leaned into this for a while now, right? Diesel saw these TDI vehicles and they thought, TDI seems like a cool thing, right? It's going to lead up to the environmental craze. People are liking these diesel vehicles. People want less gas mileage, right? And even when there's not an economic crisis, and even when we don't have to cut corners, this would still be a neat technology to have around and offer in most of our vehicle lineup. And for a while, indeed, it was. Yeah, well, it turns out that the emissions weren't so great. It seemed a little bit too good to be true, right? When you think of it, just a little bit. So I get better gas mileage. All I have to do is pay more for the gas, and yet I'm letting off less emissions than a regular gas car. It ended up not being that way. So yeah, essentially what they were doing was putting this system in that would automatically be able to detect when it was on the street and when it was in a dyno or measurer or emissions thing that would temporarily store carbon dioxide in itself and then later, switch up the emissions a little bit so the engine would perform better than usual, right? So better power statistics on, Volkswagen's part and better emission standards. What could go wrong? Well, everything. At the West Virginia University's findings, or CARB, they performed a lab testing on a fleet of Volkswagen Jetta and Passat TDIs, clean diesel vehicles, right? Upon manipulating the car's control systems, right? So they went to the control systems and they said, you want to know what? We're out on an open road, right? They took those controls off. They said, we're on an open road. We're not in a dyno, which they actually were in. They put the computer in, street mode manually and then ran the tests again. They found out, believe it or not, they're much worse than they said they were. In fact, they were, I think, like 5 times over the legal limit. Which was very bad. This all happened in September 18th, 2015. They had been researching this like 2012, started to get a little bit suspicious, right? They got a little bit, what I would describe as cocky with it, right? They would just keep putting those performance stats, emissions numbers up, and people would, furrow their brow. But, when you look at it, hey, that's the way it performed. That's the way it always is, according to the tests. And, it seems too good to be true. So let's look at an average car's exhaust system. This is going to be a shorter episode. Just warning you. I don't like why Opera GX does that. Anyway, it does show up normally, which is nice, but still annoying. Let's just look at an average car. Now, this is not the specific exhaust system from this car, because it'd be hard to find. So this is just a standard one in the way that it works. So, of course, you have the exhaust manifold. This takes, hot air away from the engine. Then you have your catalytic converter that helps get rid and filter all that crap, right? You also have 2 oxygen sensors, one entering and one leaving, just for good time's sake. Of course, you have exhaust, pipe B, and then you have the muffler, and then it just straight out the exhaust. That's a normal car's exhaust system. This is how the Volkswagen one did. So first of all, remember, this is just, imagine these are hooked up. So you had the oxygen sensor and the diesel particulate filter. Essentially, that just makes the diesel fumes better. Then you had some temperature sensors, of course, there, an oxygen sensor, and a diesel oxidation catalytic converter, which was good for diesel oxidation. Diesel oxidization. And then, of course, you had your nitrogen oxide trap, which this is like the upgraded things. You had like a computer, like microprocessor in the car that would measure things, conditions, stuff like that, almost everything, take readings from all these sensors, determine whether it's on the road or in the dyno, and then it would kick on this, the nitrogen oxide trap. Now, I'm going to read verbatim what they said because I understand it, but I don't feel confident enough to give my version of it, as I like to, oh, yeah, by the way, this is the New York Times, so nice, thanks. And I don't feel confident enough to give my version, because things might be wrong, and I don't want people to yell at me. This system traps remember, verbatim, this system traps nitrogen oxides, reducing toxic emissions, but the engine must regularly use more fuel to allow this trap to work. The car's computer dun 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 dun, could save fuel by allowing more pollutants to pass through the exhaust system. Saving fuel is one potential reason that Volkswagen software could have been altered to make the cars pollute more, according to the researchers at the International Council of Clean Transportation. So we get the idea, right? Nitrogen oxide tramp makes it perform better, except, to compensate for that, it also emits more, which is fun, but also kind of not fun. So we kind of understand basically how the system works, right? Kicks it on, kicks it off, depending on how things work, changes the conditions, right? So how were they fixed? Essentially, all they did was a minor hardware modification to the car's intake system, essentially, stopping the cheating, and a software update. The software update essentially said the car, we're not going to use this part of our brain anymore, right? It's like cutting off half your brain. It's like, we're not going to use that part of the computer anymore. Just stop using it, right? And it was the same, emissions lowering standards all the time rather than just in normal things. And if you're wondering why they would do this, why would they put the carbon trap and then let more emissions through during only the test than regular? I'm trying to comprehend this, so I'm getting very tired, right? Why would they have this nitrogen oxide trap here, right? And then let more emissions through. Anyway, right, why would they do that? For performance, they wanted the cars to feel better, they wanted the cars to handle better. As we know, one of the downsides of diesel is horsepower and performance and stuff like that, especially updated after the tests, right? So to give it more performance, they let, more stuff pass through so that it didn't get too hung up on the nitrogen oxide trap, right? So we already saw kind of how they were caught, right? Volkswagen eventually admitted that they had cheated several and multiple times, and then, of course, they ended up spending $14.7 billion to settle allegations of cheating, right? Some numbers, like $30 million with the Chevy thing, I have to kind of enunciate and make sure that you know that that's I don't have to enunciate here. You know that $14.7 billion is a lot of money. A lot of money. By the way, these are still great cars. If you can find one of the diesel ones, they're great. Just because they cheated, for decades, doesn't mean that they weren't good cars. They were very reliable, and who cares about emissions anyway? That's a joke. Don't cut my head off. That's also a joke, right? So yeah, it even got its own name called Dieselgate, and there were plenty of images like this of Volkswagen cheating on emission standards. Edited perfectly. So yeah, Dieselgate, of course, this is just, the happy, fun time image, and then what ended up happening. That's Dieselgate. With that, thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'm having fun doing this series. I don't know if you're having fun watching it, but I'm having fun doing it.